This day today, the 21st of June, is the longest day of the year. This is an important time because daylight, the long days, and it's a time in Iceland where people are able to accomplish a lot of work. Johann's birthday is on the 21st of June. It signifies really, a symbol of what he stands for. He works hard, he works long days, and he is working a long life. He's still going strong after all these years, and actually he's so busy in his artwork that he couldn't take the time to be with us and celebrate his birthday.
I always think that sunsets are nature's message that goodbye is not the worst thing in the world. To say goodbye. In a way, I think that's the way I want to die. Just goodbye. The whole idea of receptionism is based on moments like no other, or acts like no other. It's always based on that extra sensation of uniqueness, like a birth. It's very easy to imagine the phrase only a birth. But it's very difficult to explain it. When I was just a kid, I thought I was the fastest creature on earth. I thought I was faster than anything. I was probably 10. I wondered about what keeps time in check. What makes something slow and something fast? And what is it that gives duration to things? When I got into the boxing program when I was about 17, I had no idea that I was a natural boxer. It's almost like my thinking and my actions became the same thing. But this boxing all has to do with quick moments. Art is more of a sequence, more of a narrative. That's it. Looks good. So I'll go over there. I'm working on a very interesting project over there. There's a moment in boxing where everything comes together and the opponent is overpowered, usually knocked out. I always felt capable of those extraordinarily fast, glancing blows. I never knew exactly how I did it. I never felt I was as successful, as good, as tall, as strong as I should be. I always felt I was inferior to what I should be. Yeah. But at that moment, that feeling of incompleteness disappeared. And this is my philosophy of cross-sectional time. Cross-sectional time is composed of those infinitely satisfying, nothing is missing moments. Sometimes it was left hand, sometimes it was right hand, sometimes it was uppercut, sometimes it was kind of a swing. Every glancing blow was performed in that zone. It's coming. That's it. Boxing made me realize accomplishing something without time and space is possible.
In 1973, we had a great eruption here in Westman Island. And after that, everybody came into the shop and asked, is this the lava from Westman Island? And we said, no, this is a sculpture made by hann Eyfells. And then they, well, this is unbelievable. And they were touching it. And when I told Jói this, he said, well, this is a great honor. I can imitate nature itself.
This is the primordial process. It's a little bit like a volcano in the process of creating new land. This is like a new island in the Pacific. It's almost like a mountain that has a kind of a core that forms its basic volume. So it's a very fundamental idea of one thing producing another thing, never-ending kind of a cycle of reproduction, disappearance, and again new birth.
Jóhann is an interesting artist. He was, of course, born and raised in Iceland, but moved to the United States for his education and has stayed most of his professional life in the United States. He is still very well known in the artistic community. I'm not sure that a regular person who is not particularly versed in contemporary art knows who he is, but they may know his work, because we have two sculptures in public spaces in Reykjavik, one by the ocean and the second in a public park.
I always have this uneasiness about failures, you know. I could drop dead any day and it wouldn't be a, you know, a big thing. But some people have so many irons in the fire, and I just have this little place. That's about it. So why am I uneasy? It's an uneasiness of unfinished business. I think that's part of perhaps the tension of being an artist. We're never satisfied. You know, I have that silly thing, you know, I'm always doing my best work. But I still feel I'm still capable of doing my best work.
My impression of Johann from the very beginning was this was a guy who was enormously committed and serious about what he wanted to do and to achieve in the commercial art world. But Johann found that he'd really just rather be working because he loved to do the work.
You know, there are some musicians who never become famous, but all the musicians know them. They're like the musicians. Johann is in some way an artist's artist. You know, people really who understand art really admire him, but I think in many ways he failed to do all the silly things you need to do to become popular.
It's a kind of a hard thing. It borders on a certain form of insanity. If you're talking to stones, like I do daily, if it's not understood correctly, then it's a little bit insane. This is a stroke of genius. This is formed by pressure. This seems to be formed by wearing away. So it's all kinds of stresses and strains that are all applicable to human beings, even to our psychology. Stones are receptive. They have no animosity. They have no incomprehension. They absorb. In a way, they give me my message. It's a strange dialogue. Well, I was lucky when I found these. When I was weighing that rock, they wanted to sell me for so much a ton, it fell in two.
Oh, yeah.
On the scale.
Oh, yeah.
On the scale, it just dropped.
Oh,
and they thought I would quit, I wouldn't buy it.
Yes.
I said, bravo, that's fine, that's exactly what I wanted. So that got me going on this.
Yes.
I like accidents when I think I'm part of it, you know. I always want to have a hand in my accidents. So what is that? How did that get into that? Is it a meteorite or is it a space traveler? I like Texas. Somehow I felt there was a future there for me. And I still think there's a future there for me. Somehow I still think Texas is the place to be for an artist, to make a name for himself, you know. But why not Iceland? That's a good question. Texas is sort of like a virgin country in my mind. I see the Highway 290 as a cultural corridor, so I'm part of that. It's almost like I'm filling a void. Or maybe I'm just imagining things. Maybe this is not the land of opportunity anymore. Maybe I like to be an outcast or a stranger or a foreigner.
My father left Iceland just about my birth for America, so I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather, it's hard to understand how a man was born with such a strong desire or strong mission that he had to be a painter, he had to become an artist, and he was definitely born in the right country because the beauty was all around and he was able to capture it. He painted landscape the way he saw it. He didn't want to change anything, and he wanted to bring some of that beauty into the homes of people. He made a point that his art was not too expensive, so the common man could buy it and get it into their homes. Still today, there are thousands and thousands of homes in Iceland where his paintings are on the walls. It's similar with Jóhann. It seems like he is born an artist, even though his mother, it appears that she did not think that was a fruitful way to live your life.
It's the cold weather, all kinds of things, old machines, cold weather, everything. A little stiff, getting a little stiffer. I left Iceland in the search of freedom, and I know my mother did everything she could to get rid of my artistic side, everything. She was a businesswoman all her life, and of course that was more or less the breadwinning aspect of my family. She arranged my departure to America to study business administration, you know. That was her doing. And I was kind of, I was hesitated to tell her that but I took architecture, which was close enough to be an artist. She was a dominant person. She was a minister's daughter. She knew how to behave. She knew what was right and wrong, 100%. I had to tell her to fuck herself. That's how serious it was. I used the Icelandic version of it. It's more like go to hell. Farðu til fjandans. Farðu til fjandans. The mountain, the glacier that supplied my father with a surname for himself. In those days, and as far as I knew, it was a glacier. And a few years ago, it started erupting. That's a little bit of a metaphor for who I am. I'm born past Staple Mountain, and all of a sudden, that stableness decides to erupt. So in a way, my creativity is a form of rebelliousness against the status quo, against sameness, against simply something being good enough. I want more. I want some extra dimension there, and perhaps I'm overdoing that aspect. And I don't mind associating it with eruption, or in a way, an irrational behavior.
Johann tells the story that on his mother's deathbed, she wouldn't look at him. She wouldn't reach out to him. She was mad at him. She apparently had been mad at him for years. But when he came to see her and she was dying, she wouldn't look at him. She wouldn't reach out. She wouldn't touch his hand.
I see now they are years of formation. They are years where I became who I am today. But I would rather just not talk about the first 40 years of my life. I would like to begin to talk about when I gained my focus. The professor knew I was unhappy with the architectural studies. We went for coffee, and Mr. Naylor, Professor Naylor, said, "Johann, become an art major." And that was the biggest change in my life. All of a sudden, I was legitimately in an art field. And that's where probably I gained, for the first time in my life, a focus. I'm a sculptor. Whatever is expressive of life goes through me. I shouldn't take credit for that. It's like a bird flying. Should the bird get credit for being able to fly? It is my nature to be an artist or nothing.
I can still see it here. Wait a minute. I can see it here. This is longer. I haven't seen that before. I can see it here. Maybe it is in the process of cracking it. I haven't seen this before. This is pretty much the same. It's interesting to imagine that we can identify with that destructive activity in the domain of enjoyment. And if we can be schizophrenic enough to pick up on that kind of enjoyment, we're in good shape. But it takes a certain amount of schizophrenia to participate in an activity like that on an enjoyment, positive level.
If I had to produce a girl for a future companion, I couldn't do better. We saw each other across the room. She came over and asked me about my name, and that was it. I knew she was the one from the moment I met her.
She had a very successful dress shop in Iceland, and she could have really made a lot of money on it because she was a real businesswoman. And she was in company with all the big guys in business. But she followed him to America. She thought that he was the most important artist that ever walked on this earth. And everything was sacrificed for that.
When she met hann Eyfells in California, she decided that she was going to go away from being a dress designer and a shop owner in Reykjavik to becoming an artist and going to school and also studying psychology. She studied all of her life.
My aunt adored him. She just thought he was not only the best artist in the world, he was the best looking guy she ever laid hands on. He was the smartest of them all. He could have been a scientist and all this stuff. She sang his praises all the time.
When I met him 35 years ago, he was part of the faculty of the University of Central Florida, which was a small school at the time. And somebody had told me that I should meet him because he was a foreigner, just like I was. And when I went and met him, there was an incredible experience.
Benini and I went over to the home of Christine and Johan, and immediately we were enchanted by their reality, by their lives as artists, and the fact that they were a husband and wife team was intriguing. I think one of the first things that struck me about both of them was that they had their own individual style.
He took me to his field of creations. And I questioned, why would he take me here? Because all I could see is these piles, some 20, 30 foot high of concrete. Well, my question was, why would anybody do these? I mean, these are piles of concrete. I mean, like dinosaur droppings on steroids. And then he told me that the 20 feet or 30 feet that I had in front of me were just part of it, that the bigger part was below ground. And that really confronted me with this incredible reality of a man that, yes, he was teaching full-time, he had tenure, but he was consumed by this need to do on a scale that was not logical. There would be no market for these incredible structures.
Her studio was always just filled with color. And when you see a Christine Eyfells painting and you see another one, you'll know it, whether it's her Ladies Anonymous series or whether it's her Famous Faces series. You know, the color palette, the hatch marks, the dramatic emphasis that she put on the features of people, and yet they were also undeniably who they were, but they had that Christine Eyfells stroke right through every one of them.
Christine was a remarkable woman, and art was the most important thing for both of them. And I think it just broke Johann's heart when he lost her.
Some people thought I would fall apart if she died. I miss her smile. I miss her dependability. I miss her absolute kindness. But those are all things I can enjoy in my memory. But what I miss is perhaps the warmth of falling asleep next to her, which can never happen anymore. There is no creation without a destruction of some sort. There is no new phenomenon without putting something behind you in the past. When I was 7, I was in Þingvellir, the place where the earth seems to be torn apart. What kind of a violence wants to split the earth in two? Is it an expression of evil, or is it that something has to give way in order to allow something new to emerge? So it became an expression of birth.
That would do that. Okay.
Look at that. It's just a little bit of an embryonic domain to investigate this process of appearing and disappearing. It's very interesting. What we call reality is a permanent mystery, and that deeper mystery still exists in the hidden dimensions of a blade of grass. This grass has two sides, and in between those two sides is an invisible reality. In the case of a rock, it would be a total darkness. Birth and death, emerging or appearance and disappearance, a birth of something and a birth of nothing. A birth of nothing is simply a disappearance, like a rock. At this time, we are emulating the process of rocks, simply gradually disappearing into perhaps nothing rather than a new beginning. But a spiral, on the other hand, are sort of tap into a new beginning and picks up a new energy, a rebirth in this motion of returning. My special contribution, I think, is kind of needed. Rocks and spirals. I can't imagine a more successful combination of two unlikely existences. Christine, my wife, couldn't get used to me. I always said, this is the best piece I've ever made. If she were here, I would run over there, hey, Lilla, this is the best piece I ever made. I think I'm, in a way, blessed. I live with her painting, so in a very, very large measure, she is still my companion.
When we were living with them, I was there for 3 years in Orlando. Johan loved to sweat, like he used to say. I love to sweat. And that's why when he was outside, he used to do his sculptures just naked down to the waist. And he loved the sun. He's just a sun man, whereas Christine was the opposite. The responsibility of being a wife was important to her, and she always had the meals ready for him and everything. He never touched the kitchen or anything like that. Never ever. Nothing should disturb his art. And when she started doing art, she considered that just like a hobby, in a way. She was so secondary to him.
Since Lilla died, I think he's been very lonely, because they were, soulmates, and as long as they were together, I don't think he thought very much of other people, While he was in Florida, he wasn't interested. I didn't feel that he was interested in us, not even his own son. I think Ingólfur can tell you that he felt that Jo didn't care.
I consider myself the father of Ingólfur. He came about in a totally unplanned, unstructured moment. Christine, she knew all about it, and there was nothing wrong with it. There was just a normal boy, and I don't think we ever talked about it. Except just that, as a fact, that was in my background, that I had that beautiful son.
When I was growing up, of course, in the same home as he did, I always had a strong sense of connection with him. Being my father, strongly felt it, although he wasn't there in Iceland to bring me up. But sometimes I have been like a disappointment to him. I'm not up to his level of thinking or his philosophy. I'm not following what he is trying to, the message he's trying to give me or trying to make me understand.
I never felt like belonging entirely to a family. I loved them, my family, but I didn't want to be like them. Ingol was the opposite. My son was the opposite. He fulfilled, I think, that void that I left. He fulfilled the void of fulfilling family expectations, where I somehow never quite took on that role. Ingol's mother wrote me a letter a little after the birth, and she definitely described him as the most wonderful being in the world. It's a picture of a logical product, full of responsibilities and moral values, you know. I've never known him to deviate from that course. He's simply conforming to what's considered honorable and right. I was born to be different. That's simple as that. Difference as essence is the essence of my philosophy. I always had this feeling that I wanted to do things my own way, always. When the past and the future are compressed into a single moment, when that time and space is removed from the picture, we are entering a domain that I'm interested in. We have something I call slow in birth, meaning you can spread that spontaneous dimension enough for us to make a lifespan of it. I'm trying to open up a momentary window into this impossibly complicated aspect of life, which is living.
He allows time to create the work, and his sculptures allow him to momentarily to forsake time in order to catch a glimpse of it.
It has to do with passing moments, more accurately passing impulses. Every single drop is a liquid impulse where both a small measure of intention and a large part of coincidence merges. I usually evaluate every day, every drop, as having been fruitful or I could have done better. So every time I'm aware of a slight deviation from my intention, that gives me an opportunity to correct that by another drop that justifies this inadequacy of the former drop. Basically, I'm always having that dialogue between who I am and what I can do as an artist. But being a selling artist or having a bunch of collectors buying from you, that has never happened to me. And it maybe never will, you know.
He would like to be known in the art world. as a very serious contender, someone who from the very beginning had something to offer, not just in his later years, but from the very beginning because of his unique insight and his background. And Jóhann would deeply, deeply like to be able to be recognized in Iceland.
He's already resigned himself to the fact that people will not buy his work. But he doesn't say they don't buy it because they are ignorant or because they are morons. It's just they don't buy it. And yet at the same time, he wants to exhibit, he wants the work to be appreciated. He's been very hurt, as I've seen, that his own country has not given him the respect that you would think he deserves.
My hope is it will give the implication of two surfaces. It's very much like a play between two natures exchanging perspectives at infinite speed. In some ways, they are the unity of life and death. That moment in between those two major events. Very early, this cross-sectional time was one way of imagining something that holds time in check. If you cut it in half and you kind of investigate what's in between those two halves, it seems to be a domain where we can come to some understanding of what it is that makes the physical world possible.
When I was growing up, he was in America. When I was a young woman, he stayed in Iceland for a few years. He was teaching at the art school, and he was not happy at the time. He was drinking a lot. You know, he would disappear. Once he went to a bakery in his slippers, and then he didn't come home. Late in the night or the next day, Lilla called me and she said, "Is your uncle? Where do you know where your uncle is?" And I said, "No. Can you go look for him, please?" And I found him in one of the bars.
When he goes back to Iceland, he sees young men who have come to the forefront in the art world, and they're eclipsing him in his own homeland. And he's almost a nobody. He goes back and people don't know him.
The younger generation somehow did not embrace what I was doing, so it somehow I didn't fit into the art scene in Iceland. I was an outsider in my own country.
I remember those times in Orlando when he had gone on a drinking binge, and then it was so incredible to witness how she would nurture him. She would go and buy buttermilk by the gallons, and she would just pour them down his throat in order to sober him up so that he could go back to teach, because at some point he was on the verge of losing his teaching position.
Christine didn't leave him. She could have left him. She said to him, "This isn't you, Johann. This isn't the you that you profess that you want to be." And it resonated with him. He quit. He quit cold. And there's no alcohol in his life now, and there hasn't been for probably 30 years or so.
This actually happened after I left their house. So I didn't witness it, but I just knew that she was so. She told me these are the best years we ever had.
My luckiest moment is when I met Christine. Christine's faith in who I was, that's a debt that can never be paid. She gave me something that has sustained my self-worth, that I might be doing something better than simply surviving. I might be actually contributing something to the world. It's not a stable kind of a permanent anything. It's the most active dimension in the universe that we're dealing with. It has a motion that has never started, it will never end, impossible to grasp intellectually, but certainly emotionally we can get involved.
I would like to introduce our IMES Executive Director, Mr. Joseph Bravo.
Thank you for joining us for Famous Faces. These are paintings by Kristen Eyfells. Kristen Eyfells took part in several group exhibitions in the United States, Iceland, and Denmark. And in 1949, she married Johann here. They agreed that their art had very little in common except that they were made by husband and wife, and both are similar in their strong philosophical underpinnings. As you look around, you'll recognize many of these faces, but as we think about the idea of fame, fame is temporal as well.
Her almost a preparation for being a sculptor was playing with bones. In Iceland, we used bones as toys. She molded those bones in her own way. They became organic entities. She was quite aware of the phallic impressions that may be part of her inner self coming through. She probably associated authority with male rather than a female. A few times she would tell me she would rather have been born a boy. She was a lawmaker for sure. Her paintings and sculptures all have an authoritative lawmaking quality about them. She certainly wanted a place of authority. That was part of her makeup.
When she started on the paintings, he was always very surprised. And gradually he started praising her and supporting her. But then she got very sick. She had a stroke. And after she died, I think he has gone a little bit overboard in praising her.
Did you get my question?
I've seen some of those paintings for off and on for 30 years. I'm seeing most of them for the first time right now. And when Cheryl mentioned look again, twice, 3 times, 4 times, I say 1,000 times. Because I'm always amazed how she somehow manages to increase my interest in her work. It's a very deep instinct behind it. I think all the mature personalities were self-portraits. She learned a kind of a way of living through imagining the strength of these persons as she was painting. We tried many, many times, and it just became an impossibility. And very likely these paintings were strengthened by that need to have children and that impossibility of fulfilling that need. She very often talked about her paintings being her children, or our children. I will not die until Christine's legacy has entered the consciousness of the world. And maybe that's what keeps me alive right now. It's not going to make it.
After Christine died, he called, and I guess he saw the same thing that I saw as a European, the Texas being the America of our childhood. And so he started to inquire about property.
I think when Christine died, Florida became a wasteland, and I wasn't looking for anything new, but Lorraine Benini sent me photographs of this place.
I keep going by this ranch every time I go to Fredericksburg, and it looks enchanting, it's wonderful. It had been an old turkey ranch, it had been an old sheep ranch, and I photographed the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, basically it was an old turkey barn that was just about to fall over, and the sheep barn, well, it didn't look so great. And I sent everything to him, and he said, "How much land is there?" And I told him it's about 10 acres.
That really settled it. I thought these 18 or 10 buildings and 10 acres, It almost seemed ideal. So I bought it unseen, just from photographs. And then that's when I said life begins at 80 and moved here, you know. And now I'm thinking about next year to repeat it, you know, say life begins at 90, but you know, who knows? It took about 20 trucks, so it was quite a move.
It has been a struggle, and he was a name in Florida when he left, and he just ruined it. There were some people who said that he was the grandfather of sculpture in the south in Florida. He had that recognition.
Put some pressure on it. See what happens.
He just burned the bridges when he went to Texas. And then he had to start all over again.
I've been thinking about removing that tree. It's been dead for a couple of years. It needs to be removed sometime.
The first thing he told me when he moved here, he said, I'm not going to bother you at all. The only time that I will bother you is when I'll die, to ship my body to Iceland. I asked him how much it cost to ship Christine to Iceland. And he said, oh, lots of money. Well, how much money? Ballpark. Oh, he said, $20,000, $25,000. So I got to think about it. He dies, he doesn't talk to his family, and I'm going to get stuck with this bill to ship his body over to Europe. And so one day when we were in the car, I told him, you know, we are in America now, and it's the fashion here, it is to be cremated. And if you get cremated, it'd be simpler for me to mail you back to Iceland. And so he didn't say anything.
After his teaching years, instead of cutting back, he moved forward, and he was able to devote himself full-time to his work. So he worked tirelessly.
I have a feeling that 10 years from now, people will be coming here just because they like to take a look. Once it has the momentum, it can't be stopped. Right now, if I drop dead, auction it off and forget it. Auction everything off. Now, I need a few more years to give it the extra purpose that as sort of implied here. That it's something that would be nice to visit in the future when it's all finished. Well, at least presentable. Nothing is ever finished. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Looks pretty good. I'll try again. I think I can balance it. Just have to, I'm afraid I don't want to hurt that knob. I have to put that pillow on it. That might do it. It's just pure luck. Not a scratch.
In Iceland, there's a very strong belief in ghosts and the others, the hidden world that we don't see. Nowadays, that world is moving further away from us. We are not as aware of it as we were in the old days, but still remains. There's a lot of, you could call it superstition. There's a lot of superstition in Iceland still today. We see a mystical rock directly out of the ground at the coast. My grandfather, being very true to nature generally in everything he painted that rock once the way he saw it, and he added hidden people entering it like they were entering a church or a spiritual center. The hidden people is just a whole other civilization that people believed in. They live in rocks and they live all around us. And my grandfather improvised in this instance and painted a row of hidden people entering the rock.
We have to be in two worlds. There is no question about it. We have to realize that we have to work as material beings and as spiritual beings. In terms of my rocks, we go away from the idea that the rock dissipates itself and disappears into the idea that the rock goes back to its nature, to its weightlessness. It's quite difficult. That's where art comes in. Art is the height of spiritual enjoyment.
Yeah, there we go. Now it's right. Now it works.
So over the years, and he was getting older and older, we were driving the same road, and the same spot, he said, you know, I've been thinking about it, you're right. I said, of course, I'm always right. What am I right about? And he said, I thought about this cremation. I said, oh yeah? And he said, yeah, because they could put my ashes on top of Christine's coffin, and over the millennia, we'll be together again. And I thought, hallelujah.
When he first moved here, Johan, in typical Icelandic fashion, he went to that sheep shed and he dug out the ground. He got in his bobcat and every day he went down an inch. He just went in and scooped, 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 scooped. And then he laid the cement foundation and he had drywall people come in to create the sunken museum, i.e. the former sheep shed.
It was infectious, you know, her enjoyment of life. And in the latter part of that stretch in Orlando, she just painted. It's pretty close to being 3 years of sickness. She liked to hear my hammer making her frames for her paintings. So I made an extra effort to frame every one of her paintings that I could find. Every now and then I would show her a painting, and there was always that beautiful smile. So it was more of a reward for me than anything else. Pretty near the end, Christine all of a sudden said, out of the blue, "Thank you for helping me." Out of the blue. I was very surprised. She said, "Hanneman." She's the only one who called me honey. And when she said Hanneman, I knew that was the best way of addressing me, that I knew she was totally happy with me when she said Hanneman. So Hanneman, thank you for helping me. It's a good thing to remember. There is the progress breaking down.
Johan is a man of many talents. He is actually a registered professional architect, and he designed this house. It was built in the 50s, late 50s, and he held his first exhibition in this house in 1961. Yeah. The house was constructed by his very energetic brother, hann Eyfells, and it's a very fine house, and every detail is really worked out. It's a time of transition. It's on a greater scale, on a smaller scale. Like Ingeborg told us, it's changing hands.
Well, I hope it's something precious enough to be cared for. I hope it just doesn't fade away. This piece is my luck. I found it. I'm now struggling with making it into a representable example of 20th century art, or perhaps 21st century art.
What would he do? Can you imagine him not doing this? I can't imagine him not working as he is working. It's just part of who he is. And he's not going to give up. He's not going to give up. It's the same thing that when he was boxing and he got in the ring, he knew he was going to win.
From morning to night, I am involved with art, period. I wake up as an artist, I go to sleep as an artist. Being an artist is the dimension of my life. It seems that everything else falls in some kind of a shadow. There's something in me that refuses to give up. When I'm looking at my father's paintings, I always wondered when I was young why he wasn't painting houses like other painters, and he did not go to work like other men that I knew. Everybody had a different job somewhere. When I asked him, why are you painting landscapes? He answered with another question. Is it wrong to wish to make the world a little bit more beautiful, he said.
Everything, their whole life was about Johan and his exhibitions and his making of art. And Christine prevented him from talking to people. If there were gallerists or people from the art world, she was always the spokesman. So when she died, all of a sudden he is all alone and he had to start talking to people, and it was completely new to him. And that's when I got to know him, because we had long conversations. And I found out that he has such interesting viewpoints on all kinds of things.
Ah, Klang!
I think in the future, because of his art is so striking and it's so unique and different from everything else, that in the final analysis, I think he will be extremely well known. He is of that quality, in my opinion. Although I'm not, look, I'm just a scientist. I am not really an artist, and I don't really know much about art. But that's my opinion. Even if he were not my uncle, I mean, I can look at some of his pieces and say, this is really unusual. It's not that I'm not just biased, although I'm probably a little bit biased.
It has very little to do with me as an artist. It's almost, I was here to create possibilities for this piece, rather than to program something.
I can sense the power in many of his works, like the one by the seaside in Reykjavik. It's a symbol of Iceland. But I don't think I can you know, say much more about his art. You know, he's my uncle, and that's what matters to me. It's the person.
Through his process, he is just like a midwife who brings a baby into the world. Didn't create the baby, but brings it into the world. And I think that's something he does with his process.
Jóhann's sculptures are totally different from anything else. You will never mix it up with any other artist. If you see his sculptures, yes, that's hann Eyfells. It would be a shame for Iceland if Iceland missed the opportunity to be aware of their own, one of their foremost artists. So I have made an effort to support him in any way that I can here in Iceland. Both because he is my father and most of all because I feel that we shouldn't miss out on such a fine man, such a fine artist.
Sunset. It's a beautiful presentation of an act of disappearance. That incredibly strong image is gradually disappearing behind the horizon. And if what we are watching is a form of death, it has only beauty going for it, only joy and beauty going for it.
I like to propose a toast, first of all, for a change, new beginning. Jóhann's art is about new beginning. Then, for a change on a smaller scale, a house is changing hands. Tragic in some ways and reluctantly we hand it over, as Ingeborg told us. But life goes on and good people are coming in. And last, hann Eyfells has a birthday today, and cheers to Jóhann and this moment. Skál! Hurra! 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 Hurra!
Thank you.